Hello from Oslo, and welcome to Bootstrapping Your Community's Online Presence. I'm Benjamin Dills, a member of HOT's communications team, and I will walk you through a number of tools, resources, and tips you can use for getting your community's online presence up and running with minimal time and budget. And where possible, I will focus on open source resources. We have a lot to get through, so let's get started. Your first priority is making sure that people can find you online. And this means creating a website and social media profiles. For the website, one popular option is Wordpress, which is a content management system that is open source. They are able to install on a web host of your choice, and that gives you a lot of flexibility and different themes to make a website of your choosing. And it is also very well documented, making it relatively easy to learn. The drawback of WordPress is that you do need to pay for the hosting. Another option is to start your own page on the OSM Wiki. This gives you the advantage that anyone in your community can update it, and you don't have to pay for hosting. You can also be easily found by other OSM communities. A good example of this is this page by Resilience Mappers. Some things I always recommend you include on your website are a way to contact you, links to your social media profiles, a photo of your team to give a more personal connection, a quick general description of what kind of mapping you do and where you operate, and then finally, a list of any specific projects that you have been working on. Now let's turn to your social media profiles, which when you first create them should contain similar kinds of information as your website. The first choice you need to make is whether you want to start with Facebook or Twitter. And this really comes down to which one you and your community use more often. The second social media profile you should consider creating is whichever of these two you didn't create at first. And then the third and fourth profiles should probably be Instagram and LinkedIn. Instagram is good for engaging with local and global community members, while LinkedIn, being a more professional platform, is good for reaching out to potential partners. If your community does a lot of field mapping, you might also want to consider TikTok. Sharing your experiences mapping in the field, drone imagery, and interviews with community members can all make compelling short video content. It's harder to create this kind of compelling content if most of what you do is remote mapping. Next, let's talk about engaging your audience on a regular basis through blogging, social media posting, and adding visual appeal to your content with photos and graphics. If you built your website using WordPress, then it already includes a robust blogging feature. If you are using the OSM Wiki instead, then I recommend creating a Medium account for your blogging. This is an independent platform which has been used by a number of open mapping communities, including this example by Open Map Development Tanzania. A couple of tips for writing good blog posts is to try to keep them to less than 500 words and to focus on people and impact over process and metrics. For good social media content, follow the same tips as for blogging. Keep things short and sweet and focus on people and impact over process and metrics. Some other tips you can follow are to always tag people and organizations that are mentioned in your posts. Use hashtags if they're available. Hashtag OpenStreetMap is always a good starting point for open mapping. And when it comes to tracking your metrics, focus on noting the posts that perform particularly well. When it comes to when to post, you'll see lots of advice online from all sorts of different experts on social media, and they frankly all give different advice. I personally say don't worry too much about the exact timing of when you're posting. Just post during the mornings and afternoons when people are awake and using their computers and phones. Also, don't worry too much about the aggregate metrics. You have a small audience at this point, so they're not going to be able to tell you a whole lot that will be very useful. There'll be a lot of noise to the signal, as people say. Just focusing on posting interesting stories about people and impact on a regular basis, and slowly over time, your following will grow. Something that I haven't mentioned yet is the importance of high quality visuals for your blogging and social media posts. Let's start with photos. Eventually, you might want to invest in a high quality camera for photos. But to start, the camera on your phone should be enough. I recommend always having it with you when you're engaging in mapping and taking lots of photos. A professional photographer will tell you that nothing can replace taking a large number of photos to make sure that in the end you have at least a few that are really high quality. For having a place to store and share your photos, I recommend Flickr, which offers free accounts that can allow you to store up to 1,000 photos. And it allows you to create albums that you can embed on your website. Some important tips for taking photos are: first, always get permission from the people who are going to be in your photos, particularly if they aren't members of your team, but just regular community members. Another important tip is to get close to your subject. As you can see in this photo, the subject is fairly small in the image and there's a lot of background. Now look at this one, where I've cropped it so the individual is closer in and you can see more detail in the background. The second photo is much more compelling. In general, you can use cropping and editing to turn good photos into great photos. Another reason that I recommend Flickr is that it includes an embedded photo editing suite, which makes it very easy to edit the photos that you have collected. In addition to photos, you can also create your own graphic. A very useful beginner-friendly tool that I highly recommend is Canva. Canva allows you to create wholly original graphics and also upload your logo and photos and overlay them with text and other elements like borders and frames to create new graphics. It's also wholly online, which allows you to easily collaborate with colleagues on developing these graphics. If you're able to pay for an account, it also includes a large number of stock images and stock elements that allow you to use professionally created elements in your graphics. Most of HOT's graphics that appear on our social media are created using Canva. Another useful tool is diagrams.net, which is more specialized for creating things like flowcharts, diagrams, things that require a lot of detail to be shown in a very clear way. As your confidence in graphic design increases, you might want to consider starting to use Inkscape and GIMP, which are two more advanced tools that provide a lot of professional level features for graphic design. Graphic design is a very wide field, so it's hard to define a few simple tips to follow, but there are two recommendations that I can give. Select a few fonts and also a few colors that will form the basis of your design language, as it's called. This will give your graphics a brand identity that will be consistent across graphics even when different people are creating them. You can also find some useful images online, but you should be careful about this though, because most images you find online are copyrighted and shouldn't be used without the permission of their owners. Here are four sources for images that you can use either because they're in the public domain or because you're allowed to use them under a license that just requires you to give credit to the original photographer or graphic designer. Another nice thing about Flickr is that it has a search function that allows you to search by the license that a photo can or cannot be used under. You can search for public domain photos, and you can also search for Creative Commons photos that only require you to attribute the photo to the original photographer. Wikimedia Commons is another option, which includes a large number of high quality images that are in the public domain. If rather than looking for a photo, you're looking for icons, two good sources are either the Noun Project, which offers a wide range of icons that you can use if you give credit to the original designer. UN OCHA, meanwhile, has a large number of humanitarian icons that you're able to use for humanitarian related work. If you need to share a part of your screen for a tutorial or presentation that you are recording, there are three tools that I can recommend. If you only need to take a still image, a screenshot, I recommend FlameShot. It's a screenshot tool with a lot of extra features. If you want something that's animated, you can use Screen to GIF, which is actually the tool that I'm using for this presentation right now. Finally, if you want to take full video in MP4 format or another format of your screen, then you can use ShareX. This tool is more complicated, so I would only recommend if full video is what you need. When you've established a regular schedule of posting to your blog and social media with strong visuals, then you might want to consider the third priority, which is telling your story in a more unique way, including podcasts, video storytelling, and story maps, timelines, and more. For editing podcasts, two tools I can recommend, I've used both of them, are Audacity and Ocean Audio. Audacity is more full-featured but more complicated, while Ocean Audio is quite simple to use. For recording podcasts, I recommend Zencastr because it has a free plan that includes the essentials that you'll need, and it has two very valuable features. The first is for when you are recording a remote podcast over the internet, is the only thing that the host needs to do for the guest is send them a link. And then the guest just clicks on the link, and then just like starting a meeting on Zoom or Google Meet, they'll be taken into the recording room and able to record their side of the podcast. The second feature is that via this link, Zencastr is recording the guest's audio locally, as well as the host's audio locally, on each person's computer. This is extremely helpful because recording the audio on each person's computer gives much higher audio quality than having one or more of the people's audio have to go over the internet to be recorded, after which it suffers compression, which leads to lower quality audio. When you're done recording the conversation, you'll end up with an audio file for each of the people speaking in the conversation. By giving a separate audio file for each participant, Zencastr makes the editing process much easier. If someone coughs while another person is speaking, or two people are talking over each other, it is much easier to edit the podcast so that each speaker can be understood clearly. When it comes to recording video content, there are a few more tools that I would like to recommend. For editing, I recommend Kdenlive, which is the software that I'm using for putting together this presentation right now. And if you ever need to record a presentation at your computer, I recommend using Jitsi, an open source video conferencing suite, along with a free Dropbox account. Jitsi makes it very easy using their web interface to start up a room just for yourself, from where you can start a recording and have that saved to a Dropbox account that you've created. From there, you can download the video that you created, drop it into Kdenlive, and edit away. A few tips if you're going to get into producing videos. Do know that ultimately audio quality is more important than video quality. If you're just trying to decide between upgrading your camera or upgrading your microphone, you should generally upgrade your microphone first. Second, if you are recording videos on your phone, it's always recommended to record them in landscape mode. Finally, if you're going to be uploading your videos to YouTube, YouTube has a great music library of either public domain or attribution-only music that you can use in your videos without incurring any copyright issues. The final set of tools that I would like to recommend are the free visual storytelling tools from NightLab, a project at Northwestern University that creates tools for journalists, but that can be used free of charge by anyone. These tools include story maps, frame comparison, timelines, and much more. I don't have time to go into detail about them now, but if you want to use these more advanced forms of storytelling, do check them out. Before wrapping up, I would like to give some advice on developing your communication skills. The most important thing to do, of course, is to practice, practice, practice. I recommend taking your phone everywhere you go when you're mapping. Take lots of photos, post stories to social media, and as you're posting these images and stories, actively think about what feels the most compelling to you and why. In addition to giving yourself feedback, also get feedback from colleagues in the community. The second thing is to learn from other communities. These are a few open mapping communities I recommend following because they have very active and effective online presences. Finally, I provided some links to some resources that I have personally found very valuable in developing my skills that you can use to read and expand on the ideas that we've talked about in this presentation. And of course, at the end of the day, running a quick internet search is always a helpful way to find out how to use a particular piece of software that you're using or to get advice on how to address a particular video editing or graphic design challenge that you're facing. Thank you for joining me today. Let's move on to questions and answers.